Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Best You podcast. My name is Nick Carrier, body optimization coach and creator of the 10-Week Transformation. The mission of the show is to help you get closer to the best version of yourself so that you can live a life of more meaning and impact. In today's episode, we have Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. Dr. B is a New York Times bestselling author, award-winning gastroenterologist, and one of the leading experts on gut health and the gut microbiome. During this episode, we talk about how your gut impacts your immune health, your energy, and your longevity. We break down the power of fiber, how much you should actually be consuming on a daily basis, what kind of fiber, how many different kinds of plants per week you should consume, and more. And he talks about what kind of impact that the GLP-1 medications are having on your gut health, and you don't want to miss this one. For now, it's time to get closer to your best you. Let's dive in. All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am fired up to be joined by the one and only Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. Will, I'm pumped, man. I read Fiber Fueled. I forget exactly what year it was, but 2-3 years ago or whatever it was, probably like really early on when it came out. And I remember it was during a season of my life when I decided I want to really hone in on my nutrition education. And I was like, I want to read a bunch of books from a lot of different perspectives, whether it was people who were like keto or people who are plant-based or people who are carnivore, like all different sides of the argument, if you will. But everybody oftentimes has the same goal. But I remember going into your book, and I'm not somebody who's a plant-based or like a vegetarian or vegan. I remember going into the book being like, I don't know about this one, just because I knew it was like a plant-based book, and I remember finishing it and being like, that was awesome. And I highlighted so many things, took so many good notes, and fiber was already something that I kind of paid attention to, but it became something that I pay attention to every single day. It's something that I pay attention to with my clients as a fitness trainer and nutrition coach myself, and we really talk about as hitting a fiber goal every single day as being a super important part of their nutritional habits, and that's in large thanks to the information in your first book, Fiber Fueled. But I'm so excited about your second book, or this next book coming out in January, Plant Powered Plus: Activate the Power of Your Gut to Tame Inflammation and Reclaim Your Health. But to kind of set the tone, I want to lay a couple foundations and then ask you what there might be to build off of that. I don't have a huge understanding necessarily of gut health, but the simple two different pieces of the puzzle that I think of when it comes to gut health is the gut lining and the population of your gut bacteria. And simply said, the gut lining, you want to make sure your gut lining doesn't have holes in it. It's not porous. It doesn't allow particles from your gut to leak out into the bloodstream, causing inflammation. And so you want a strong gut lining. And then the second part being the population of your gut bacteria. There's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria. You want the good bacteria to outpopulate the bad bacteria, therefore you don't have gut dysbiosis, which also can lead to inflammation. And so if you populate the gut with good bacteria by eating probiotic-rich foods, and you feed that good bacteria by eating fiber and prebiotic-rich foods. That is kind of the general, very quick overview of the gut health that I have. Is there anything to start off that you would like to add that would be important foundational knowledge for the listeners today?
Well, first of all, Nick, thank you for having me, and I'm deeply honored what you said about my book, Fiber Fueled. I love the fact that you weren't sure going in, and then you came out with a different sentiment, right? Because to me, these arguments that we make with dietary tribes are kind of stupid.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tracks and options that people have in order to achieve better health. But there also are these specific levers that do specific things, and we must acknowledge them. And there's no doubt that protein gets acknowledged when it comes to muscle building. And I'm here to make sure that fiber gets acknowledged in terms of building your gut muscle and in terms of longevity. So now to answer your question about this foundation that you laid out, you basically just did a quick little summary of chapter 1 of the new book.
Okay, good.
And so I'm just going to build off of what you said, which is we have 38 trillion microbes, and they live inside of us, and they outnumber our human cells. We are less than 50% human. And they're there with a purpose. They're not just they're not parasites. They're not just there to absorb whatever it is that they can get from our diet. They're actually completely integrated into our physiology as humans. And we know this because the gut barrier that you mentioned, you just painted a picture of leaky gut, right? And leaky gut is another way of saying increased intestinal permeability.
Yeah.
Our intestines are completely lined, the entire tube, with these cells, and it's a single layer of cells called the epithelial layer, and they turn over faster than any other part of our body. And this is an important part of the story for everyone at home to hear, because every 3 to 5 days, you are going to install a brand new gut lining,
Wow.
a brand new gut barrier. So what that means is that healing can happen fast, because if you change things and you upgrade your brand new gut barrier that you're going to get in the next 3 to 5 days, if you do that, you can start to feel the difference almost immediately.
Totally.
And the premise of my book, which you touched on very lightly, but I just want to really sort of slam dunk it home because people need to hear this sort of thesis, which is that you have the gut microbes and you have the gut barrier, and when the gut barrier breaks down, which by the way happens when the gut microbes aren't well,
Right.
because the gut microbes are the stewards of the gut barrier. They are maintaining that gut barrier for you. Okay? And when the gut barrier breaks down, then these things start to leak into our bloodstream that they're not supposed to be there, like lipopolysaccharide. And when your immune system, which is 70% of your immune system, lines your gut, and it's right there. And when your immune system comes across these things that are not supposed to be crossing that gut barrier, it's going to react the way that it was trained to react, which is to attack. And when the immune system goes on the attack, that's inflammation. But the entire point is that we don't need that, right? That is chronic low-grade inflammation that serves no actual functional purpose. It's just the failure of us to protect our microbes, protect our barrier. And so now we're activating our immune system, and there's consequences to that.
Yeah.
So in my new book, I identified over 130 health conditions that are associated with inflammation.
Okay, I want to touch on one of the things the encouraging message that you shared with us about how our epithelial layer, the epithelial cells turn over every 3 to 5 days. So we essentially can form a new gut lining every 3 to 5 days. What influences the turn? I've been trying to figure out how to form the question in a way that actually makes sense, because I'm trying to get to a level of science that I'm not an understanding of. So when the cells are turning over into new cells, what impacts the creation of the new cells to make them healthier? Is it like the population of the microbes in your gut, that if there are good microbes in your gut, then the cells in your epithelial layer are healthier? I don't know if that makes it, if that question makes sense or not.
No, it does. And I'm actually going to give you a one-word answer, and then I'll explain it. So the one-word answer is butyrate.
Okay.
Butyrate is the answer. All right. Now let me work backwards to explain what's happening here. So we have these gut microbes that basically anything they come into contact with that's in our diet, they have the capacity to transform. So, and fiber is the classic story, because fiber is non-digestible by human enzymes. So that means the fiber works its way through 20 feet of your intestine to arrive in your colon, which is the large intestine. And then these microbes, as teams, they get to work, and they have these enzymes that they will use to change the fiber. And it stops being fiber. It's not fiber anymore. And now you are releasing what are called the short chain fatty acids, one of which is called butyrate. Well, to answer your question, what butyrate does, which is produced by the gut microbes when they come into contact with fiber, what butyrate does is, number one, it nourishes the cells that line your intestines. So 70% of the energy for those cells, it comes from butyrate, right? Those cells are powered by short chain fatty acids.
Mm.
But the second part is that if we were going, let's pretend that I've given you the bricks, Nick, right? And we want to build a house. Well, you're not just going to put the bricks around each other. That's a mess. We could knock that over so quick.
Right.
Right? You need cement. You got to bind those bricks together. You got to hold it And so there are these proteins called tight junctions, which are the body's version of cement. So the concept of the bricks, those are the cells. And the cement is the tight junction protein that holds these cells together. And when those tight junctions are strong, we have a strong gut barrier, which means that we are basically like fighting against leaky gut and reducing it. And those tight junctions are powered by butyrate. So basically what we find is that this short chain fatty acid called butyrate, and there's other short chain fatty acids, and we could get into the nerdy details. I've already 5 minutes in, people have already established I'm a nerdy dude. So, but the point though is that this one short chain fatty acid, butyrate, it has this special power where it basically powers those cells, makes those cells healthy, actually protects us from colorectal cancer, and simultaneously is going to fuse up these cells through tight junctions that basically fortifies the barrier.
Wow, that's awesome. So you said the tight junctions are proteins? Like, are they specific, like usually amino acids that are responsible for these tight junctions?
Yeah, so these tight junctions are proteins, and basically, if you imagine them, it's almost like having a spot weld that's on the two sides of the brick held together. So they basically fasten together. And it turns out that this is not the only place that you find these tight junctions. So you find them in many different parts throughout the entire body. An example would be the blood-brain barrier.
Mm.
So it turns out that our blood-brain barrier is conceptually very, very similar to our gut barrier.
Wow.
And in fact, butyrate also helps the tight junctions that fasten the blood-brain barrier. So I'm sure there's people that are listening that have experienced brain fog. And you go to your doctor, and the doctor is not sure what to even tell you. What is that? Well, I'm here to tell you that I believe that brain fog is leaky brain.
Wow.
Where the blood-brain barrier is porous, it's not strong, because the tight junctions are not strong. And so then the result is that you have a brain fog and you can't focus and get things done.
Wow, that's crazy. I've never heard that before. That's fascinating. Okay, I want to get practical and away from the science for just a second. I've always seen recommendations and kind of gone by the recommendation of fiber intake on a daily basis of like bare minimum 25 grams of fiber. And then I've heard that you can't really eat too much fiber unless you are coming from a place of like not really eating much. You want to like ramp it up somewhat slowly, maybe by an average of increase your fiber intake by 5 grams daily from week to week. And then the last part that I've heard in terms of this consumption daily recommendation would be like more accurate or more specifically 15 grams per 1,000 calories, at least 15 grams per 1,000 calories. What is your general recommendation for fiber intake for people to really maximize the benefits or maybe start seeing some of the benefits of fiber intake?
Well, there's an entire conversation that we could spend quite a bit on unpacking this, but let me cut to the cliff notes and let's get practical and tactical. So, number one, the recommended amount is typically based upon your caloric intake, as you mentioned. The number is actually a minimum of 14 grams. So 15 grams would be an appropriate amount, or even more in some cases.
Yeah.
But it's a minimum of 14 grams per 1,000 kilocalories. So if you take the average woman, she's not consuming as much as men because men on average are bigger. And so for women, it averages out to about 25 grams of fiber per day. And for the average man, it averages out to about 38 grams of fiber per day. So now the problem is the average woman in the US right now is 15.
Wow.
So she's only 60% of the way there. The average man in the United States is 18. So he's less than 50% of the way there.
Yeah.
And so we got a pretty good ways to go. Now, the approach, you sort of mentioned that some people would argue that there's no upper limit. I'm I think I like to think of myself as like probably the world's biggest advocate for fiber, right? I wrote the book about it. And I actually think that we need to like pause for a moment and get a little more nuanced, because the gut is a muscle. It can be trained. It can be made stronger. And I want your listeners to approach this the same way that you would approach coaching them in the gym, which is that you, number one, have to meet them where they are today.
Yeah.
And you take that spot. So let's imagine the average person is doing like 15. All right. So you take that. And if we were working out, you would increase that ever so slightly. You want to actually like require some effort. So we might go to 18. And when you get to 18, you're going to see how they feel, right? So like if you were in the gym and you were training someone and you push them too hard, you're going to slow it down,
Yeah.
right? So there's no exact standard of like how quickly you escalate a person on their bench press or on their squat or whatever, or their deadlift. You start with what they can handle today, and then you sort of test them to see what they can handle tomorrow. And then you continue to build incrementally from there. And if you give it enough time and they're consistent with their approach, then actually everyone is capable of becoming strong.
Yeah.
And the same is true with the gut. Everyone is capable of having a strong gut, of having a healthy gut, of consuming plant based food, of being able to consume that food without restriction and being able to consume it without symptoms. But there's a path to get there. The gut muscle needs to be worked. Fiber is exercise for the gut. We haven't been working our gut. We've been like laying on the couch when it comes to our gut health.
Yeah.
So we have to go slow. So the idea of 5 grams a day, I would actually slow that down quite a bit, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
I guess the recommendation I heard was like 5 grams on a daily basis, but on increased by 5 from week to week. So like if somebody's currently consuming 25, do 25 the whole week and then do 30 the whole next week and then 35 the whole next week. So just to clarify my own saying.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's perfect, right? I think that's
Yeah.
perfect, and I think that's a great framework for like the way in which we would approach this, and then I also think that the last part is just building in the ability to say, hey, this is a little bit more than I can handle. We're going to slow this down and back it off a little
Yeah.
bit.
Totally. Okay, we'll get more a little bit more nuanced. I know that we throw out these terms as if they're all the same thing. Like when we say protein, we think, oh, there's everything's the same protein, where there's like, no, there's a bunch of different types of amino acids. And same thing with fiber. It's not just fiber and everything's the same kind of fiber. There's different kinds of fiber. You know, with protein, there's amino acids like leucine that are more responsible for muscle building, like tryptophan that's more responsible for mood and sleep, and then threonine that might be more with skin health. And so is there something similar for fiber where there's this kind of fiber that's more responsible for this, and I guess break down the different kinds of fiber for the listener who can further understand the more nuanced topics of this big general term.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I think that like looking at protein and looking at fiber as big general terms is completely the right way to do it.
Right.
And the idea, though, within the protein space of these specific amino acids serving specific functions is absolutely true. And it's a little bit different when it comes to fiber because fiber is so complex and it's not the same as breaking it down into, a specific pattern of amino acids. So we don't even know. I've never even been able to find an estimate in all my reading of how many different forms of fiber exist.
Yeah.
But I think it's sufficient to understand. What I would love to relay to your listeners is that first of all, every single plant has fiber. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, seeds, nuts, legumes, herbs, spices. Mushrooms have fiber too. Mushrooms are not plants; they're fungi, but they kind of behave like plants. They have a lot of similar characteristics. So, and the pattern of fiber, but also other nutrients that you find in each of these plants is like a fingerprint. It's entirely unique. It's going to have its own types of polyphenols, its own types of phytochemicals, which are different types of, like, they can be of many varieties, but these are basically chemicals that are found in plant based foods that have an impact on our physiology, right? And different types of fats and different types of proteins and different amino acids in there. And so that unique fingerprint results in a unique impact on the microbiome. So you can't so simply isolate the type of fiber and then say that type of fiber does this.
Right.
Instead, I think of it as more of a whole food form approach where specific foods have specific impacts. And those impacts, they are complementary. So it's a bit like diversifying your stock portfolio, right? Or it's also just like exercising all of your muscle groups without overemphasizing just one.
Yeah.
we shouldn't just get grams of fiber from the one plant-based food that we really, really, really
Can't
like.
just train arms as much as you might want to. Can't just train arms.
It would look really weird, and you're probably going to hurt yourself at some point,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, it would look really weird. Like, balance is very important. Like, as much as I personally want to make my chest muscles as big as possible, I don't enjoy back exercises, but I know I have to balance it
Yeah,
out.
totally. Variety is key. And I know that you personally try to get in around 30 different types of plants, and I want to dive into that in a second. But before I do, I want to kind of go back to the original concept that I presented in terms of the gut microbes and the population of them. Like you said, there's 38 trillion microbes, but instead of doing math based off of 38 trillion, I'm going to do simpler math based off of like if the total population in your gut was like 10 microbes. And let's say that there's 5 good microbes and 5 bad microbes. How do you think about reversing the population so it's like 8 good, 2 bad, or 9 good, 1 bad? Is it a matter of, okay, there's right now 5 good bacteria in there and they need to stay around, and so they need to be fed fiber so that they stay there. The other 5 need to be starved so that they die off. And then we need to add more in by eating probiotic foods. Is that kind of like the simple way to kind of think about it?
So, I think that generally the approach, this is a great question, by the way. Generally, the approach from my perspective is about feeding the ones that you currently have
Okay.
and empowering the good guys. Because what we see is that when you empower the good guys, they basically like command and control the space and they will suppress the bad guys.
Really?
So,
Okay.
yeah, and it's conceptually similar. Sometimes like I think of how they're very similar to the way that we are in the real world, Nick. So, like if you have a decayed part of a city, right, that's like festering with crime, right? It's really hard to like turn the corner on that. You really have to like get law and order in there, get police involved,
Right.
bring in some opportunity for people to develop businesses and make money, right? Right. And so that like we're talking about a dysbiotic city and trying to transform that into something that's thriving and healthy.
Yeah.
And the same is kind of true in our gut where, you know, when you're in dysbiosis, it's like the gut microbiome, the balance is out of whack. You have too many bad guys. They're wreaking havoc. They're having too much fun. And the good guys, the few that are in there, they're powerless. They have no teeth. So, and we want to flip that balance and get it to the balance that you've described, which is if there's 10, we want 8 good guys,
Yeah.
right? And so, and you can see this. You can see this exemplified with antibiotic use. So, because think about when do people get thrush, right? When do women get yeast infections, right? When do people get a C. diff infection that causes severe diarrhea and an inflamed colon? These are consequences of antibiotics because the antibiotic is actually wiping out all the microbes. And then whoever's still alive could be a yeast, that's the thrush or the yeast infection, could be the C. diff that hasn't been touched by the antibiotic. Whoever's left, they rise up, they grow, and they take over, and they raise hell,
Mm.
right? So now, um, to your second point, this is part of what made this a really great question because is there a role for adding in new microbes? And the science, the data say yes. But I would argue that's a secondary piece
Okay.
because you have to start by first feeding the ones you already have. And in America right now, 95% of Americans are deficient in fiber. So you can add in new good guys and they'll starve too. Or you can take the ones you currently have, feed them, empower them, make them strong, and then you have a healthy ecosystem. And then you can start to sprinkle in some new good guys, and they'll be able to become a part of this as well. There was a study out of Stanford where they had people increase their fermented food intake for 8 weeks, and what they found, it was really cool, was that after 8 weeks of fermented food intake, they increased the diversity of their gut. So that means they added new species of microbes, and they reduced measures of inflammation, which basically, in a way, proves the principle behind my new book, Plant Powered Plus, which is that the gut and the immune system, they rise and fall together. So in other words, if you make the gut healthier, you will be suppressing the immune system. in a good way, making it anti-inflammatory.
Gotcha. So just to stay on this kind of like good guys, bad guys, population analogy, what when people are deficient in their fiber intake and not taking nearly enough as maybe as they could, if we're saying there's 5 good guys, 5 bad guys, when we're not having enough fiber, is the way that through the same language that we're analogy that we're talking about it, when we're not having enough fiber, is it like we're not empowering the good guys, or we're disempowering the good guys and we're allowing those 5 bad guys to rule and have more say than we would like them to, and therefore they're causing inflammation? Or is it like we're not allowing the good guys to have anything to eat and therefore they're dying off? Like, what does that actually, how does that work if we're deficient in fiber?
Yeah, so there's a few facets to this. First of all, your diet is always displacing something else, right? You're getting your calories. In America, we're all getting our calories.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's one big pie, and it's a question of like, how are you cutting the pie? What's in there, right? So if you are reducing your fiber intake, there's a high probability that what you're doing is you're replacing it with something else, and that could be like an ultra processed food,
Right.
right? And those ultra processed foods, they're bioactive too. They have things that are going to impact your microbiome and empower and foster the growth of certain species. The problem is they're going to empower the growth of the species that you don't want, the ones that are inflammatory, the ones that are not healing your gut barrier. In fact, if anything, they're breaking it down and they're disrupting it,
Mm.
right? So, but on the flip side, we talked about the butyrate. So butyrate being the essential tool for repairing and restoring the gut barrier, that comes from fiber intake. But it's not just the butyrate itself, it's also the fact that the fiber is food for the healthy microbes that produce the butyrate. So you feed them, they procreate. When you feed them,
Right.
they'll make more.
Okay.
And then what you see is that actually by creating more, you're going to get actually more butyrate. So can I give you a quick example on that
Yeah,
end?
totally.
So uh, I actually am the founder of a supplement company called 38 Terra. And we have a product that's a prebiotic fiber. It's fiber resistant starch and polyphenols. And we put it to a test in a study, a microbiome simulation study. And we basically tracked how many short chain fatty acids people get over the course of 15 days using this product. And what was interesting, Nick, is that you give the same amount every single day, but the amount that's produced of short chain fatty acids
Mm.
increases.
Wow.
And the reason why it increases has nothing to do with increasing the amount of the supplement. The amount of the supplement was the same dose. So basically what's happening is the microbiome is changing. It's adapting to the fact that it's now being fed with the supplement. And as a result of that, it's producing more and more and more of these short chain fatty acids. So that adaptation yields like basically efficiency and results. You get even more from the same amount of fiber.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Since we actually went there, this was going to be a topic that I wanted to cover anyway, the supplement topic. Obviously it depends on the supplement, but is fiber from real foods and then fiber in supplements similar? Is real foods much better than supplements? Does it just depend on the supplement? I guess, how would you rate the effectiveness of fiber supplements? Obviously you have one, so like you're going to be pro the supplement that you created because you believe that the way you guys built it was going to be worthwhile. But let's talk about fiber supplements and the worthwhileness of them, generally speaking.
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer it by saying this, that like I am a medical doctor and my goal is results.
Yeah.
That's what I care about. So, and I would argue number one has to be diet. You can't out supplement a bad diet. And I feel like I see a lot of that.
Yeah.
You know, people who think that they can eat whatever they want to eat, and then if they take like enough of a litany of supplements, they'll be okay.
Totally.
Right. I feel like what you're doing is you're taking a C minus and turning it into a C,
Mm.
right? But you're not going to turn it into an A minus, let alone an A plus.
Right.
To me, the role of supplements are that you should do these things that you and I are discussing. You should absolutely, every single person who is listening to us right now, whether you are sick, whether you're healthy, irregardless of what your health goals are, if you want to be healthier, then you should follow the things that we're going to discuss today. And if you do that, then you can take that C minus and you can turn it into an A minus or an A. And then we're talking about optimizing, because optimizing is how you get that extra step that brings it up to an A plus. And that to me is the role of supplements. So now when it comes to fiber supplements globally, first of all, I don't see them as being the same. I would never argue, even though the product that we sell comes from 7 plant-based foods, I would never argue that that's the same as eating those 7 foods in a salad,
Yeah.
right? So not the same thing. But from my perspective, there absolutely is opportunity. There absolutely is benefit. And I've seen it thousands of times. And this is the reason why I believe with every bone in my body that this is the case. And the study that we've done with our product is there to back it up. But beyond that, Nick, I kind of like, let me put it this way. If you take any supplement, this is regardless of which brand it is.
Right.
If you take any supplement, you should feel the difference. If you can't feel the difference, why are you taking it? On a theory, on a theory, like a possibility? No. If you can't feel the difference, then it clearly hasn't impacted your health that much, right? And what you feel might be different. It might be that you notice that you're not as hungry as you used to be and you have better control over your cravings. Or you might notice that you have more energy, more focus, more ability to get through the day and achieve your tasks. Or you might notice your skin clearing up, right? Or you notice healthy bowel movements. So, or like less bloating. But whatever it is, you should feel the difference. And if you don't feel it, you should stop taking it. And I would say that's true for every single thing, including the stuff that I sell.
Yeah, totally. Love it. Love it. So I mentioned before how you have a week, or often kind of like a weekly goal of hitting 30 different plant foods. And you're very clear that it's not just 30 different vegetables or like 30 different fruits. It's like there's fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds. It runs the gamut of the different plant foods that you're trying to get in. Is this something that you actually like still track on a weekly basis? Did I hit my 30 this week? Or are you just kind of gotten to the point where you know about what it takes to get to 30, and so you kind of eat meals that you know are going to get you there?
So I think that like for the beginner, or frankly at any stage, this is a great way to gamify this.
Yeah.
And you can make it fun, right? And so this is not meant to be stressful. This is more about having a fun way to add more variety to your plate. And certainly this is also true with kids. Like kids dig this concept and will absolutely engage with this, and you can use it to your advantage as a parent. All right. So now the number 30 is not a magical number.
Right.
29 is almost as good. 31 is slightly better. Right. So this is not like some cliff or threshold that you want to cross that line. The bottom line is that more is better in terms of variety. So if you take where I'm at, is that this is just embedded into my mealtime approach every single meal, which is to basically ask a very simple question, like, what can I add to what I currently have, right? And sometimes I'm not adding anything, but like if I see some delicious Rayo sauce, right, like and you can make a decision. Are you just gonna have tomato sauce, or do you want to turn that into a vehicle that basically serves you 5 or 6 more plants? Because you could so easily do that. Throw some onions in there, some garlic, some zucchini, maybe some spinach, right? Like the mushrooms, boom, and it tastes even better, right?
Yeah.
So, or like if you have a soup, or I'll give you a quick example. Today, I had a quite like quick lunch, and so I had some leftover chili, and I just added some more beans to it, and it served the purpose well, and I feel light and satiated and focused and really good.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. I think that's such a good, like you said, gamification is huge for so many of us to be motivated to do something and have fun doing something. And with nutrition, as the more that you can focus on adding things, not subtracting things, the more you can focus on what you can have rather than you can't have, the better the approach is going to be and the more sustainable the approach is going to be for so many people. One of the things that, we've touched on a little bit, but not necessarily directly, but gut and the immune system, how our gut health is directly correlated to our immune system and like how regularly we do or don't get sick and maybe the potential of diseases down the road. You also say that where do I have it here? The first like 1,000 days of life are crucial for the immune system development in the gut. So I know a lot of people hear that, and that's, one of the reasons why people don't want to have C-sections. They want to deliver vaginally because that's really important for the gut health of the baby. If the first 1,000 days are super important for your immune system, how much can we really impact or improve our immune system through something like diet once we're 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc.?
I mean, obviously, none of us remember the first 1,000 days of our life, right? Like,
Yeah.
because we're talking about the first 3 years, and there's a lot that happens in there, and we can't go back and change that. So, but what we can do is we can make choices that start today. And I tend to take a very optimistic view of how this all works because our gut microbes are constantly adapting and changing. Like literally, as you and I sit here right now, right as I sit here, I have this matcha green tea with a splash of lemon, and those microbes are reacting and responding to that specifically. And by tomorrow, there will be specific families of microbes that have grown disproportionately in response to the fact that I happen to have this matcha as you and I sit here and have this conversation. So the gut is very forgiving. The gut is massively adaptable. It is an imprint, a picture of your life on so many levels, not just your food, not just your dietary choices. It's also an imprint of your exercise, your physical activity, the different types of exercise that you do. We could talk about that. Also, your circadian rhythm and how you tap into your daily routines, whether or not you get morning light exposure, your connection to other people, your whether or not you've been exposed to trauma. So yes, like our childhood and whether or not we received antibiotics in the first few years of life, whether or not we were born by cesarean, whether or not we were breastfed, those are factors that sort of set the stage for how our life starts.
Right.
But as we sit here today, all of us, we have a massive opportunity. And it really starts from today of building these little habits and installing them. Because if you do that, every single day that you do these things, it pays dividends.
Yeah, totally. I love it. I always take the optimistic approach too, in terms of how much agency you have to change the outcomes of your life. I mean, it doesn't do you any good not to feel like you have any agency. So if you feel like you can make even a small dent in improving your immune system, then like take the optimistic approach and do it you think might work, and let's go.
Well, it's like, look, I don't mean to, because I've taken care of many very sick people
Right.
during my career, right? So I don't want to sit here and make it sound like, oh, that's easy,
Yeah, of course.
because it's not fair to them. And so, and it's not easy. Change is hard. If change was easy, then we all would just change into whatever the perfect, diet and lifestyle is. We have a
Right.
lot of pressures and a lot of reasons why we don't. All right. But that being said, if you take the person who is so sick and they're struggling with that health related issue, how would I approach that? And how and what with what I just said, what does that mean for them? And the answer to that is that I would number one focus on like getting their disease under control. So that requires medication, right? Like my approach is not diet and lifestyle only. So I would use, if a person has, for example, raging ulcerative colitis, I would use a medication to get the ulcerative colitis into remission.
Mm.
And then we start our process. And recovering the gut and healing that dysbiosis is a bit like recovering from a bodily injury. It takes time. You don't get to like basically dictate how quickly this happens. You just have to allow the body to heal. But you got to be consistent and stick with it. So for that person, if we install a healthy diet, healthy lifestyle, then given a year, we can make, like, first of all, given 4 weeks, we can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Given a year, we are making a massive difference in terms of that person's gut health. And if you take this person and you put them into remission and they never have a flare for the rest of their life, Nick, that would be as close as I can bring them to a cure, because there is no such thing as a cure for these chronic inflammatory issues. But if you put them into a permanent remission, that is a cure. And there's a study, I hope you don't mind me sharing this real quick.
Yeah.
So there was a study in Japan that looked at this, and they took a group of people with ulcerative colitis, and they looked at what happens if we either just give them Remicade, which is a really powerful medication that costs like thousands of dollars a month, okay? Or alternatively, we give them Remicade, we give them the same medicine, but we complement it with a more traditional dietary pattern. And that more traditional, it was a Japanese form of diet. It wasn't the same as what we would do here in the States, but it was also a flexitarian. It was not like 100% plant-based. They had meat in there, okay? There's lots of choices that can get us to where we want to go. So it was medication only versus medication plus flexitarian diet. And the medication only, about 6 in 10 people will get into remission within 1 year.
Mm.
All right. So 15 out of 25. But with the combination of the diet plus the medication, it was 24 out of 25.
Wow.
96%. And then they tracked those people 10 years. And they're like, okay, so what happens with these people during the next 10 years? Half of them didn't have another flare.
Wow.
So you take these people that have this debilitating chronic inflammatory issue and you give them 10 years of their life with complete and total quality, because they didn't just take a medication. They were addressing the root of the issue by changing their diet.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great stuff. To kind of bounce a little bit back to the probiotic rich foods or fermented foods, I think that for me, when people talk about fermented foods, there's like yogurt, sauerkraut, kefir, temp, like ones that are really not that traditional in the American diet. And so when I'm trying to think about trying to hit X servings of fermented foods per week, I'm like, geez, I can have yogurt bowls for breakfast and I can have sauerkraut, but not too much of that other stuff sounds all that great to me. When do you think about trying to get a certain number of fermented servings of fermented foods on a weekly basis, or do you think that just takes care of itself when you think about 30 different plants, or how do you think about servings of fermented foods on a weekly basis? And if you do think about it, what are the different foods that you have?
Yeah, so I do think about it because I think that you have to give special attention to this category because it's not a natural thing for us.
Yeah.
And we've proven this because every study that looks at like what is the fermented food intake in America, the typical answer is 0.
Right. I mean, totally.
And if there's any, then it's the like occasional minor amount. And so, and in the study that I mentioned earlier, which was the Stanford University study, in that study, the amount that they were consuming for 8 weeks was actually a large amount, but I don't want that to be a barrier to us because I'm not talking about you doing something for just 8 weeks. I'm talking about you doing something consistently on an ongoing basis. That's what's going to yield major benefits for you. So if I could get people, Nick, to 2 serves a day, I would spike it like Gronkowski. Like it would be the biggest spike, right, with celebration.
Yeah.
And so what are our options? Absolutely yogurt, right? Absolutely. It just has to have live active culture. That's my only caveat.
Right.
Kefir is another option. If you try it, it tastes pretty good.
It is pretty good, actually. I tried it and had it for a few weeks in a row, and then I just kind of got out of it, but it actually is pretty good.
Yeah. So if you build that into your routine, it's hard to do if you're not sort of like focused on this thing. So if you build a routine around that, then that's how you make this and you get it done. There's sauerkraut, there's kimchi. If you take like the concept of pickles in America, what we know is in the middle of the store, there's that jar that's probably been sitting there for 2 years, and it's got cucumbers that they poured some vinegar over the top of. And they sell it to you and they call it a pickle. But actually, if you take cucumbers and you also get black peppercorns and some garlic and some dill, and you submerge them in a brine, so saltwater solution, you will land at that acidic flavor, but it will actually have live cultures.
Mm,
So pickles were never meant to be vinegar based. Those to me are fake.
mm.
The real thing is fermented, and you can get those like if you get Bubbies in the States, Bubbies have live cultures. So like
What's Bubbies?
Bubbies is a brand. Bubbies is a brand of pickles,
Okay.
and you'll find them in the refrigerated section of your store, or you can make your own. The making your own is always the least expensive.
Right.
So, and then other options that are on the table, uh, like to me, you give me a choice between a person who's going to have a bubbly drink, and my choices are kombucha versus Diet Coke versus Coke. Give me the kombucha every single day of the week,
Yeah.
right? So kombucha counts as a fermented food.
Totally.
So these are the types of things that we just got to look at, like where can we sneak those in?
Yeah, totally. You know, one of the things in preparing for the interview, actually today this dawned on me. Back, I mentioned how I think a great approach or the better approach to sustainable nutrition is thinking about what you can have, not what you can't have, what you can add, what you should take away. And, you know, with the rise of the GLP-1 drugs and everything like that, it's essentially having people not eat as much. I'm just curious as to your experience, or if you have experience with patients or anybody, are people, because they're eating less on these drugs, having any kind of negative impact on their gut health because they're just simply not eating as much food, therefore they're not getting as much fiber in or as much of the good stuff in their system? Are they having gut health negative impacts or anything like that? Have you seen?
These drugs are complex.
Right. And I'm not saying like that would make, I'm not trying to say that they're bad per se. I'm just saying, is that something that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, neither am I. For the people who really need these drugs, a person who's morbidly obese and struggling with their weight, and I've seen these people many times,
Right.
and many of them have tried all of the stuff, right? And they just can't get there. And then this drug gives them a path to get there. I celebrate that. I'm glad that the drugs are there for those people. But the issue is, Nick, that in Nashville or in Charleston, South Carolina, that's not the majority of people who are using these drugs, right?
100%.
The majority of the people who are using these drugs are people who are just trying to lose a little weight here, and they want to look good. Um, like I don't have a problem with vanity. I want to look good too, but I think there's a trade-off that you're making. So the problem is that you are shutting down the gut. You are pumping the brake so hard on the gut. Your stomach turns into what we call gastroparesis. Means your stomach is paralyzed. This is why these people get nausea, right? And it's also why they're satiated. They don't have any appetite. Their stomach is not willing to receive anything. And then the rest of their intestines basically shut down as well, which results in constipation. They all get constipated, all of them. And anytime you take a person whose gut is in a rhythm, that's where you want to be. You want to be in a rhythm, having regular, healthy, satisfying bowel movements. Those are indicative of a healthy microbiome.
Yeah.
And every study that I've ever seen, Nick, where you deviate from that, whether you move towards diarrhea or in this case you move towards constipation, every time you deviate towards those things, the gut microbes, they pay a price. The microbiome is not as healthy when it's out of rhythm. Every time. So it's impossible for me to believe that this is like a big win for gut health. I do think that if we're getting real on GLP-1s, then we need to have a conversation about how this is not just a medication thing. You need to change your diet and your lifestyle. Because with the caloric restrictions that you do have, health is not achieved just through a calorie deficit.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
So if you have junk and your diet is filled with a whole bunch of junk, and this is probably why you were excessively consuming calories in the first place, then you reduce the calories and you're like basically setting yourself up for nutritional deficiencies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that we have a lot of work there in how we approach that
No,
issue.
I love the way you said. It's funny. It's so simply said, but I don't know if I've heard somebody say it that specific way, that health is not achieved through a calorie deficit. It's like, of course, if your goal is to lose fat, then you need to be you want to be in a calorie deficit. But weight loss does not equal health. Like there's so many things of what health is that is outside of the number on the scale. And that's why people need a more wide ranging view of what health actually is rather than just the number on the scale, but the vanity issue. I mean, again, I'm vain too. I want to look good, but at the same time, the vanity issue sometimes gets the best of us and causes us to forget about how health is so much more than just that number on the scale.
You know, Nick, don't get me wrong. If you take a person who's metabolically totally out of balance, so it's interesting. One of the questions that I came to as I was writing the new book was, is weight gain inflammatory? And the answer is yes, because if you are carrying excessive weight, you are by definition metabolically out of balance. But then the follow-up question that I had is, well, what is there a case where weight loss is inflammatory? And the answer can be yes also, if it's excessive. So when you have people that have their body mass index is too low, that's actually inflammatory,
Mm,
right? Like a person, for example, with anorexia, with an eating disorder,
right.
right? And so if you take these extremes and you bring them back towards the middle, the gut microbiome does get healthier when you bring a person back to metabolic balance.
Right.
And that is anti-inflammatory. So it's not to say that you didn't do anything good through the calorie deficit and the loss of fat. You did. But the point from my perspective is that if we're talking about long-term health and prevention of disease, the constitution of your diet matters tremendously,
Totally.
right? You can't eat a junk food diet and just reduce your calories and think that you made yourself healthy. You did
Hmm.
not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Totally agree. Well, I think this might be the last question. This has been awesome. But you have 4 kids?
I have 4 kids.
Okay, and what are their ages? I know a couple of them are real young.
So my oldest, I have 3 daughters.
Okay.
My oldest is 11. My son is 9. And then I have a 3-year-old and an almost 2-year-old.
Okay, great. Love it. Love it. Awesome. That's great. So there's gonna be a lot of people who are listening right now who are parents, and I have a ton of clients who are parents and parents of young kids often as well. And I've heard so many times how they never got sick, and then they started having kids, and then their kids went to daycare and school, and they always come home with germs, and they get sick so much more often because of the germs that their kids pass around. First off, I guess did you experience that? Second off, is there something that somebody can do in terms of building up their immune system so that when their kids bring home a bunch of germs, they're more defensive against it and their immune system is stronger, so they're not going to get sick as regularly?
Yeah, it's a great question. All right. So first of all, yes, definitely. When you have kids, they bring stuff home, right? This is an inevitable trade-off. The greatest joy in my life and my purpose. And I wrote about this in chapter 8 of the book. My life changed with the birth of my daughter and my oldest, who's 11. It changed everything for me, and it helped me to frame and understand so many facets of my life, what I was doing going forward, but also looking retrograde, looking back at some complex things and some of my relationships with my parents. So the greatest joy in my life is children, but there are trade-offs. There absolutely are, and part of it is that you will occasionally get sick.
Yeah.
I would reframe on some level. Let me start by just reframing to say that actually the act of getting sick makes you stronger,
Hmm.
right? So I don't want to get you so sick that you have to go to the hospital. That's a different level, right? But the idea of being exposed to stuff, that means that your immune system is actually learning. And so when we're born, we talked about the first 1,000 days. When we're born, the adaptive immune system is basically at baseline. Like it knows very little. And then over the course of our lifetime, it builds a memory. And that memory is basically like the catalog of things that it's been exposed to and is prepared to protect you from.
Yeah.
So every single time you get exposed to one of these things, your immune system actually gets a little bit stronger, and you're adding to that memory bank that is there to defend you through the years as you move forward.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, the way in which our body reacts to a virus, you don't get benefit from a disproportionate reaction that's going to make you feel absolutely horrible. And if we think back to it, I know that most of us, including myself, don't really want to talk about COVID anymore. Like we're kind of burnt out on it.
Yeah.
But if you think back to early days COVID, there were some people who got exposed and they got the sniffles and they were fine. And there were some people who got exposed and they crashed hard, right? And the difference there is actually the immune system. So it's not the virus or the amount of the virus, it's the way in which your immune system is reacting to the virus.
Mm.
And a hyperbolic response, hyperbolic meaning that it's like, your body is completely out of control, that's not indicative of a healthy immune system. So the opportunity that we have is to actually do these things that we're talking about to make the immune system stronger so that, yeah, you get sick, but the symptoms are not as severe, it's over quicker, and you're not like taking it to that extreme.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I found that's like been true for me. And I think the data would back me up on that. I'm happy to share some of the studies that are there.
Yeah, totally. I guess the last question, since we're on the immune system, and I would want to be respectful of your time, and it's kind of an impossible question, I feel like, probably to answer, but just give me your sense when it comes to the immune. Let's go, baby. Your immune system. What percentage of your immune system do you think is kind of like genetic versus how much is something that you can actually control?
Well, it's hard for me to put a number to that because it
Right.
kind of depends
Like
on
I
which
said, impossible question.
Yeah, you got me. You got me on that one. I retract my request for a hard question. No, it's a good question. I'm glad you're asking. So, look, there's no doubt that there are certain people who have a higher genetic risk of certain health related issues. So I don't want to make it sound at any time that the person who has ulcerative colitis, the reason why they have that health issue is because they didn't make good choices. That's not fair, right? Because if that were true, I definitely would have had health issues like that were along those lines for the first 30, 32, 33 years of my life because I was a mess. So, so there's definitely a genetic component to this, but I also think that you can't change your genes, but you can change your microbiome. You can control and shape it. And then the interesting thing about it is that actually through a number of different tools, including the short chain fatty acids that we've been talking about, your microbes actually have the ability to like kind of control your genes. So this is a new arena called epigenetics.
Right.
And it's kind of like this. Imagine that your genes are like a switchboard, right? So if you have the gene, then the switch is on the switchboard, and you could potentially turn that gene on, which might mean that you get celiac disease or something like this. But it's the microbes that actually are flipping the switches.
Mm.
So the point is that yeah, we're born with a certain genetic code. You have no control over that. But I also don't think that we're a victim of our genetics. I think that actually instead we have a lot of agency and control over where we are in the future. Acknowledging that we're going to have challenges and struggles, all of us.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, this has been awesome. Super fascinating, super educational conversation. Really appreciate the time here. You guys need to make sure you check out the new book coming out January 13th, which is going to be probably just right after this podcast comes out. So good timing there. Plant Powered Plus.
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I just want to say this. The book is called Plant Powered Plus. Let me explain this. I don't want people to be intimidated by this name. All right, because literally what I talk about is there are many different dietary patterns, and you talked about this right in the beginning of the show. There are many different dietary patterns that can lead to health. And that includes a Mediterranean diet and a traditional Japanese diet and a flexitarian diet and a pescatarian diet and healthy forms of a vegan diet and healthy forms of a vegetarian diet. We have lots of choices, right? So instead, what this book is about the connection between the special nutrients that exist in plants, which we're not getting enough of. That's the truth. So I want to put our focus on the stuff that we're missing. Get the stuff that we're missing and how we can power these microbes. So that's what being plant powered is about. We're powering a healthy microbiome that can support our immune system. And the plus is basically all the other stuff. Because there is a chapter about circadian rhythm. We talk about time restricted eating. We talk about sleep. We talk about, there's a chapter about supplements and supplement stacks for the morning and for the evening and how we should be circadian with our supplements. And then like I mentioned before, chapter 8 is my masterpiece chapter. And it's basically about the way in which we can be impacted by trauma, or the importance of human connection and spiritual connection, and how that can act through the brain-gut connection to actually impact our health.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I want people to know that despite the name Plant Powered Plus, I'm inviting you in the same way that you did with Fiber Fueled. I'm inviting you to not be intimidated, check out the book, and then see what you think and reach out to me and let me know.
No, I love it. I love it. So would it be safe to say that it's a book on gut health, how plants can really empower positive gut health, and how how a bunch of other things can as well?
100%. Our gut and our immune system are so interconnected that they rise and they fall together. I have not found any proof that you can separate them.
Yeah.
If a person can find me a study where you show me that they're not together in the same way, then I would love to see that. And so that gives us the opportunity, which is that if we heal the gut, then we are actually healing the immune system, and that's anti-inflammatory.
Amazing. Well, we'll have the book link in the show notes where you can pre-order and everything like that. And we'll have his Instagram and website in the description as well. But Instagram and website is at the Gut Health MD on Instagram. theguthealthmd.com is his website. And we'll have all the other social media linked down below as well. But Will, this has been awesome, man. A super intriguing conversation, super fascinating conversation. I hope you unlocked some education that people really needed. And like we kind of mentioned off show before we went, you guys, if you do actually do some of this stuff, there's books that we listen to, that we read, there's podcasts that we listen to where we hear and read great information, but then it just kind of goes by the wayside and we don't really actually enact the material that was put before us. But if we really put it into action and put it into practice, then you really can see transformative benefits in a relatively short period of time, especially with gut health, if you really stick to this stuff. So I hope you guys apply it more than anything. But Will, that's all we got today, man. I appreciate your time. That was awesome.
Yes. Thank you, Nick. And thank you everyone at home for listening to us.
Sweet.